see Daniel. Hi, Lenora. With Deb, Bob, Shari, Calvin, Penny, John, Josie. Okay, all right, that's everyone. So we'll get started here. It's calling to order at 1:31. And first off, we'll recognize that we're conducting our business today on the territories of the New Chomouth people. So because we're so geographically separated, we'll just keep it at that. But we should recognize and appreciate that we're doing that today. So first off, we have a fairly, straightforward agenda in front of us. I do not believe that there are any amendments to the agenda. That being said, we can start with a motion or anything that people would like to add to new business or something else.
Move the agenda.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Seconded by Director Koontz. Okay. And when you do speak, if you could just identify yourself by just either your last name or whatever, just so it's a bit easier for everyone to keep track, because I think some of us might not be on gallery view. Okay. With that in mind, if there are no comments or questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item number 3, which is declarations. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest or declarations of gifts over $250? I do not see any. That brings us to now the adoption of minutes. We have one item for minutes, and that is the Board of Directors meeting minutes for April 8th, 2020.
Move for adoption.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded, Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Okay. Any comments, errors, omissions? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. So normally we have a 10-minute maximum for the presentation, but we have Daniel Healy and Ms. Lenora Lee from KPMG regarding our audit findings. So please take it away. And I'll go on mute.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Good. Thank you for having us at the meeting. Hope you are all doing well and staying safe and healthy. The purpose of the audit findings report is to provide you with some information as to our areas of focus as it relates to the audit of the financial statements of the regional district. And there are some required areas of communication in accordance with the audit standards that are included within this report. Overall, you'll see attached to the financial statements and referenced in this report that the conclusion of our audit is what's referred to as a clean auditor's report or a clean audit opinion. And that indicates that we have not noted any material errors within the financial statements and that they are prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which are the standards that the regional district is required to follow as a government. The status of the report is included here as well. So we thought we'd just take you through, in summary, some of the highlights of the report, and happy to address any questions that you may have. So Dan will start with the first portion of this report here, and I'll continue on and conclude. Over to you, Dan.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So firstly, I sort of wanted to recognize and acknowledge the work from Terry and Doug, sort of getting through this audit in what is a fairly strange time to sort of complete this process, and to sort of thank them for their assistance as we got through it. As Lenora said, I'll walk us through, the summary, the audit findings, the status of where we're at the moment, some of the more sort of high-level pieces as we went through, and then I'll pass it back to Lenora. So what is page 15, the page that's on the screen at the moment? The purpose of the report, Lenora walked us through that. One of the requirements is for us to talk to you about any changes in our audit approach since the audit findings letter that we sort of sent out, or the audit planning letter we sent out in January, and there'd be no significant changes in terms of our audit approach. So where we're at today is that we are substantially complete the audit. We're once we get through the review of these findings, we'll be looking for the board's approval of the financial statements, and then we'll ask management to sign the management representation letter, which will include an update on any subsequent events, and we'll be in a position to issue our audit opinion. So moving on to the next page. So our areas of audit focus. So we have a risk-based audit. And so what we do is we categorize areas of the financial statements into different buckets of risk. We did not identify any areas of significant risk. So that would be more than a normal level of audit risk. And so the areas we identify here around revenue, tangible capital assets, the landfill liability and contaminated sites is pretty consistent with last year. We'll walk through some of the items that we audited and some of our findings on that in a couple of pages. In terms of adjustments and differences, we identified one audit difference that was corrected, and there are no uncorrected differences at this point. So we keep going. There we are. So significant accounting policies and practices. No changes to any of the critical accounting policies this year. There is one new financial reporting standard around restructuring transactions, but that didn't have an impact on the regional district's financial statements. Controls and other observations. We didn't identify any control deficiencies, but I think there is a performance improvement observation that we'll discuss as we get through. Independence, we're required to confirm that we're independent with respect to the district. And so we're confirming that from January 1st, 2019 up till today that we are independent of the regional district. So moving on. If you can scroll down to the next page, please. So our areas of audit focus, revenues, tangible capital assets or TCAs, the landfill closure and liability for contaminated sites. These have we sort of categorize our areas of audit focus as areas where there's not a significant risk, but more than a normal level of risk. And so we do sort of specific work around these areas. So we identify these different buckets. I don't want to go through each sort of bullet point, but in terms of, I think, things for us to to sort of bring to you guys' attention, really the main piece is probably actually on the next page. We sort of scroll down to page 19, and that's more to do with the tangible capital assets, and this sort of relates to the audit difference we identified during the year, and this is to do with the costs incurred on lowering the road around the airport. And really, the difference is really just a reclassification. There was $580,000 sort of spent on lowering the road around the airport in order to, I think, increase the amount of traffic that actually use the runway. This had been treated as a capital asset of the regional district, but really the road is actually owned by a private company, and so we'd recommended that actually be treated more like a grant than a capital asset and amortization. Management had recorded the full amount and depreciated the full amount in the year, so there was no actual impact on the surplus calculation itself. Okay. In terms, I think, and then so audit risks. So there are two professional requirements around audit risks, and so one of those is the fraud risk around management override of controls, and that's a risk that we can't rebut, and so it's a presumed risk that management is in a position to be able to override certain controls. Our response to this includes sort of testing of journal entries. We perform what we call a retrospective review of significant estimates, and we evaluate the business rationale for any significant unusual transactions. And we have nothing really to report to the board in this regard. Okay. Obviously, one of the audit risks that's unique this year is around the COVID-19. And so this has been treated and disclosed as a subsequent event. And so really the requirements around that are to disclose not only sort of an unusual transaction, but also to try and quantify what the impact on the district is. At this point, and certainly we're not in a position to certainly quantify. So we bring it up, and it's disclosed more as an event that we know will have an impact on the district going forward, but the scale and the quantum of that is sort of unknown at this point. So we've discussed the disclosure with management, and in the financial statements you'll see the note itself. Okay. Significant accounting policies and practices. There were no changes to critical accounting policies or significant accounting policies used by the district during the year. And we didn't note any issues with management's identification of accounting estimates. And Lenore is going to walk us through the two most critical estimates on the next page. And in terms of significant disclosures, we have no issues with judgments made and the overall neutrality, consistency, and the clarity of the disclosures in the financial statements. So I'll pass it back to Lenore to walk us through the critical accounting estimates.
Great, thanks, Dan. So we wanted to highlight here, in terms of the preparation of the financial statements, there are a few significant estimates that are made by management, and these are areas that typically involve judgment, establishing some assumptions in that the amount and timing of cash flows that will be incurred in the future have some uncertainty to them. They are also relatively large values in the financial statements. And so as part of the audit process, we obtain an understanding and ensure that the range of potential outcomes and what has been recorded in the financial statements is reasonable. So the first one here relates to a landfill closure liability. And this is the requirement to estimate how much of a liability has been incurred to date for closure and post-closure costs of the two landfills that are operated by the regional district. There's a liability of about 3.1 million recorded currently in the financial statements, and future costs in total, once those landfills are full, is generally about 10 million is the latest estimate. So right now, the district has recorded about a third of that liability, and in our view, that is reasonable based on usage and management's best estimates as to future costs. One item to note here is that the accounting standards will be changing in 2022, and that will require that the full amount of the liability be recognized in the financial statements. And so in 2022, you'll see that that value increases significantly and will be closer to that $10–11 million mark. That's distinct, of course, from the funding of the liability, which remains under your and management's discretion as to how much money to put away in reserve for the future costs that will be incurred. But the liability will represent in the future the full amount. The second bucket here relates to contaminated sites, and this is a specific area as it refers to capital assets that are not currently in use, and any commitment by the regional district to remediate those properties. So this could be things such as contaminated land, or say a gas spill, or anything under the ground that may be restricting the use of an asset. There is a requirement in the accounting standards to recognize the cost of the commitment of the regional district to remediate. As at December 31st, 2019, there were no liabilities recognized, and we're comfortable based on the audit work that we've performed that that's reasonable. The next page speaks to financial statement presentation and disclosure. And just a couple points here under the disclosure differences area that we wanted to point out. These are consistent with previous years. The groupings of capital assets and expenses on the financial statements are very useful and valuable to the readers, yourselves, and the users of these financial statements. And that's historically the rationale for why they've been presented in the way that they are. We're just noting here that the financial statement standards do have a different classification that is also required within the financial statements. And so management is working on that in terms of presentation of capital assets by type of asset versus by service area, as well as the expenses similar by area is the requirement within the accounting standard. On the next page, as Dan mentioned, we did not note any material deficiencies in the control environment of the regional district to bring to your attention. So these would be areas that could result in a material or significant error to the financial statements. On the next page, we've provided an update to some of the observations we made in previous years. One relates to the expense reimbursement policy. And historically, there has been a good practice in place around review of expense reports and approval, and we haven't noted any issues there. I know that we've reviewed a draft policy that management had put forward to add a bit of rigor as to expectations around documentation requirements, the types of acceptable expenses, and ensuring that the hierarchy of approval in place is appropriate, that a superior is always reviewing and approving the expenses of an employee. So we're comfortable that the new policy will address any previous recommendations that we may have had. And the second comment here relates to accumulated surplus. This is a continuous comment from previous years, and again, one that management is working on. The accumulated surplus within the financial statements right now is presented as one line item. And of course, it is made up of a number of different surpluses from a variety of service offerings and contributions. And so often we do see in other regional districts or local governments a bit more breakdown within the financial statements to show the composition. So that will be a continuing area that I know management has on its plate and agenda for future. And then lastly, in terms of adjustments and differences, this one we won't go through again, but Dan had mentioned there was one adjustment to remove cost additions and amortization from the balance sheet and record revenue and expense. So there was no impact to the surplus as a result of this adjustment. The remainder of the report here are appendices, which we won't go through in detail, but these include some areas of communication, a copy of the representation letter, which we'll obtain signed before exchanging for our auditor's report. And that just indicates that we've received all the information that we need to complete the audit. The current developments appendix includes future accounting standards that will be effective in the near term. And the most significant, of course, I did mention around asset retirement obligations that will affect more than the landfill of the regional district and will require some work by management to assess what types of liabilities or future costs will be incurred when assets are taken out of service. Those are the highlights of the report that we wanted to touch on, but once again, we would express our appreciation for the assistance of management, a good, clean audit process, and the support of the team in getting this work done.
Thank you for that. All right, Douglas or Terry, do you have anything to add? And then we can open it up for comment or questions.
I'll let Terry go ahead. I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Nothing to add from me. It's been great working with KPMG, and it was definitely a different and challenging audit doing it by email mostly. So I will save my comments for when we adopt the financial statements in a bit here.
Okay, great. All right, comments. Director McNabb?
Here are some details.
Oh, there we go.
So the only comment I had really was with regards to the deletion of the road system as an asset. It is involved in our asset management program. And I think that if it's within the property of the Alberta Valley Regional Airport, then it should be defined as an asset. If it's outside of that, then it shouldn't be defined as an asset. So I'm not really sure which is which, but it was just something that I had a difference of opinion on. But thanks.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Terry, please go ahead.
So that is the Northwest Road, and it actually is not going to be our road. It was our responsibility to lower it, but it's going to be handed back to, I believe it's Western Forest Products to maintain moving forward. and they manage that road on an ongoing basis. So not an asset of the ABRA.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to thank you, Daniel and Lenora, for connecting. And if we have any follow-up, we'll send it your way. But thanks for doing the job.
Great. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
You as well. Bye. Okay. Now, looking at the agenda, we're finished item 5. There doesn't appear to be anything for item 6 or 7, which brings us into item 8, which is the request for decisions and bylaws. So 8A is a request for decision regarding resolution submissions. Yeah, Douglas, if you would, or Wendy, since you're on the screen, I assume you want to take it away.
Yes,
Go ahead.
I'll speak to this. So the deadline for resolution submissions for consideration at the 2020 UBCM convention is June 30th. So staff are requesting directors if they could forward possible ideas for resolutions to staff by May 22nd. That'll provide staff an opportunity to develop the background materials and resolutions, and then we will bring forward the drafted resolutions for consideration by the board on June 10th.
Great. Does anyone have any further comments? There is a motion in front of us here. Make sure I have everyone on my screen. Yeah. I think the only thing I would ask is if we have a month to do it, you might want to speak with any committees you're a part of or chairing to maybe see if there's anything to bring forward through there. Okay. Now, Wendy, is this a resolution that we want to put forward right away?
Yes,
The one-
please.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So would someone,
Roberts, I'll make the motion.
thank you. Okay, so just for the record, do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Director Osborn. Just for the record, the motion states that the Alberni-Clyde Regional District Board of Directors submit possible ideas for resolutions for consideration at the 2020 Union of British Columbia Municipalities Convention to the General Manager of Administrative Services no later than May 22nd, 2020. And further, Regional District staff be instructed to bring back drafted resolutions and background materials for consideration by the ACRD Board of Directors at the regular Board of Directors meeting on June 10th, 2020. So that was moved by Dr. Roberts and seconded by Dr. Osborn. Does anyone have any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, thank you. That brings us to item 8B, which is a request for decision regarding bylaw 791-3, the Port Alberni Airport Extended Service Area Establishment Amendment 2020. So before we begin, Wendy, please stay connected. There's a question from, I believe, Dr. Cote in regards to, we refer to the airport as the Alberni Valley Regional Airport. However, it's stated as something different here. Would you mind answering why that is?
Yes, certainly. So when we established the airport in 1992, the airport service, Transport Canada rules apply. And so it's the nearest city is what the airport is named. So the actual official name, legal name for through Transport Canada for the airport is the Port Alberni Airport. And so because we're amending the establishing bylaw, we have to keep the citation the same.
Thank you. And thank you for the email question, Dr. Cote. Okay, so I'm actually not certain who the person is that will be bringing this forward. Is this Mr. Erg? Mike, are you speaking to this since it's a bylaw, or is this?
Actually, it's me again.
It is? Okay, good.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Great. So in February of this year, we received a request from the Achuclisset Tribe government to join the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Service as a full participating member. So to do that, staff drafted an amending bylaw to amend the boundaries of the service area to include the Achuclisset. So the Board of Directors considered the amending bylaw at our meeting on February 26th. That received 3 readings. Following that, I had to go out to all the participants of the current service, the City of Port Alberni and of Alberni Valley electoral areas, and ask for their consent. 2/3 majority consent is required from the participants in order for Uchucklacet to join. We received consent from all of the participants. So now the bylaw is put forward for consideration of adoption by the board, and if adopted, the Uchucklacet will be part of the Alberni Valley Regional Airport Service.
That's awesome. Director Koontz, I see that there's a motion here. Would you like to move it?
I would so, sir. Thank you. I'm going to make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Director Haggard. So just for our records and for those of you watching at home, if there are any, it states that the Alberni-Clycourt Regional District Board of Directors adopted bylaw 791-3, Port Alberni Airport Extended Service Area Establishment Amendment 2020. Pretty simple. Any comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, motion approved unanimously. That's great. That brings us to item C, which is a request for decision regarding the Alberni-Clycourt Regional District financial statements. Please go ahead, Terry.
Okay, I'll just give you a few highlights from the financial statements that are presented for your consideration. Some of the highlights are the tangible capital assets went up about 5.2 million to a total of 46.6 million. And then the overall accumulated surplus, which is made up of prior year surpluses, reserve balances, and current year income, is up about 5.2 million to 53.8 million. From a statement of operations standpoint, we had an excellent year in terms of grant funding from other levels of government. It's up about 4.9 million. And in 2019, we had a total of $7.2 million worth of conditional grants, which was great. Most of that was from the runway resurfacing project at the Long Beach Airport. Overall, the surplus of the regional district was up 1.8 million to 5.1 million. I think the auditors covered most of the other parts that we talked about, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions? Okay. Doesn't seem like there are. Would anyone like to move the motion to adopt? Or, yeah, to approve, sorry. Director Haggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that the Alberni-Clycourt Regional District Board of Directors approve the 2019 audited financial statements for the Alberni-Clycourt Regional District as presented.
Great. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Director Bodner. Saw your hand go up. Okay, any further comment before we move to a vote? Douglas, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a recovering CFO myself, I just wanted to acknowledge that the significant work that Terry Fong has done. We are in a situation at a regional district where the financial plan needs to be completed by March 31st, and that just so happens to be the time when we're working on the year end and also the audit. And so it begins up being a very busy December, January, February, March for Terry. And I just wanted to say thank you for the wonderful work that she did do again this year in all of those endeavors. Thank you.
Yes, very much. Thank you. Okay. With that in mind, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? All
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to item D, which is a request for decision regarding director remuneration for separate items. So I'm wondering if someone could take us through that, please. Please go ahead.
I can do that.
Yeah.
So these are just meetings that have had inquiries from directors about and are outside of the bylaw. So I'm just presenting them as an education to let you know that they're not covered and providing an option for you to approve some of them as per the bylaw.
Okay. And just for our records, the motion states that the board of directors approval is required if any of the following meetings are to be eligible for remuneration. Do we need to do this separately, each of those number 4 approved, or could we do it all as one go?
You could do it all as one go if you would like to approve them.
Okay, so we have EOC updates for elected officials, EOC spokesperson video development and radio interviews, and age-friendly meetings, as well as old growth strategy meeting, which was held on January 30th.
Yes.
So since this is remuneration and I'm going to move this as the chair, would anyone like to second?
Seconded, Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Okay, any comments? Director McNabb and then Director Osborn.
So I hope I'm on here.
You are, yeah.
So I'm actually opposed to doing this. I think that in the times that we're in right at the moment, there are hundreds of people in the Alberni Valley that are doing far more than us to work within the problems of COVID-19. And I certainly won't be claiming any of these. If I claim the previous meeting with regards to old growth forest, then they can just reverse it. But I just see that our contribution is very, very small to the situation that we've got at hand. And for us to sit at home in a half-an-hour meeting and claim remuneration for it, I just really don't, in my mind, doesn't go to the spirit of being a director and helping the people of the Alberni Valley. So I'll be voting against this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Dr. Osborn. Did I miss anyone else? Okay, please go ahead, Dr. Osborn.
Thank you. I just wanted first to clarify and then to comment based on that clarification. Is the motion that all of those four things be approved and eligible for remuneration? It was not clear to me.
Oh, yes. So that's why I asked that first. So
Okay.
I was moving that we just adopt all four. If you'd like to pull any of them out, then we can do an amending motion.
No, I just, the way I read the staff report, there's a recommendation from our staff for us to consider this. And so now I'm just clarifying that indeed the motion is to approve those four items for reimbursement.
Yeah.
So understanding that is the motion. I will agree and echo much of what Director McNabb said. And I personally do not feel these are not formal appointments to external processes that I think are something that all directors who happened to attend should be claiming for. I personally feel that the amount of time that I have saved by working at home and having had a couple of meetings canceled is equal to the extra time that I might have put into by attending these. And yeah, I think this is just part of our job at this point, and I will be tending to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Osborn. I have Dr. Cole and Dr. Cote.
I concur with the two previous directors. I have always had this approach to what I'm doing, and I think it is my honor and pleasure and duty and all of those things to serve the people in the capacity that I am fortunate enough to have. So I will be not in favor of these recommendations.
Great, thank you. I have Dr. Cote. Did I miss anyone else? No, please go ahead, Dr. Cote.
Thanks. I'd just like to clarify that I don't know of a meeting that I've been to where I've just sat for half an hour and didn't do, time prepping for meetings. There's always a lot of reading that's involved with just about every meeting that you attend. And really, I don't recall that many half-hour meetings ever. So I think that the spokesperson remuneration, I think, is valid. It takes time to get ready for that. And I know that Director Minions and also Director Osborn do a lot of promotion for COVID-19 to our communities on the right things to be doing and how to be reacting, how the community should be reacting. I think that that's very valid, and like to compensate them for that. EOC, the area directors are the connection to the people. So of that area, we are the mayors and the councillors of those areas. And we get calls, we get questions from our communities. I've done a couple newsletters. I don't get compensated for any of that. I think there's a lot of volunteerism that already happens, and it's mounting. I'm busier than ever, and I'm not asking to be compensated for everything, but there is certain things that I think that directors should be compensated for, and equally. So there was also a couple of other meetings here that have been identified that their meetings, just because the COVID-19 is happening, doesn't mean that people shouldn't be compensated for their actions, for their representation. And that goes for, like, I would never ask my staff to not be compensated for something. So why would I ask my fellow directors not to be compensated? So that's just my comments. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Cote. Now there's Dr. Cole and then Dr. Minions. I should have went the other way. Please go ahead, Dr. Cole.
Sorry, to be clear, I want to say that I'm from the approach that it's not about not wanting other people to be compensated. It is a purely personal opinion that I'm the person who thought if I was elected to council in Cote that it was a volunteer position. So I've done everything I've done from my own personal perspective, as it wasn't for remuneration of any sort, and especially in these times. So I'm not against other people being compensated. So I guess I don't know where to put that, but I just want to be clear. I'm not against other people being compensated for their time.
Okay. And I have Dr. Minions next.
Thank you. I don't really have a strong opinion on this one way or the other. I am not of the opinion that these are volunteer positions. And I appreciate people who do, feel that they are volunteering their time or take it that way. I think that I think we are all in this for the reason of improving our communities. But I think it is valid to say that we do spend a lot of time and we should be compensated. Now, on these meetings specifically, I don't really have a strong opinion. I have a question, though. I'm wondering if any of this is covered by the province, as a lot of our expenses related to COVID-19 are. So is there a chance, have we inquired if the province will pay for policy group meetings, for instance?
Let's pause there. Then we'll go to Dr. Koontz, but Terry?
The meetings, the EOC updates that the elected officials have been having twice a week or once a week are actually not official policy group committee meetings. That's why they do not qualify. The policy group, I believe, Doug will have to clarify, but is defined much narrower than the full board and council. So it would not be eligible under the EOC task number. We could try to claim for the policy group meeting, but we are still looking for our clarification from a number of things from EMBC regarding claims during this event.
Douglas.
So further to that, Mr. Chair, the originally the province wasn't going to provide a task number and therefore recovery of costs for municipalities with respect to the pandemic. So that changed, and we do have a task number now, but it is they're approving every single piece as we submit it, one at a time, as opposed to everything that is in a broad description under the task number. So that's a long way of saying really that we can make a more detailed inquiry, but as far as I know, only the policy group would be the default payment, and the policy group under our plan for the Alberni Valley is when it's the when it's greater than just the city or greater than just the rural areas, ends up being yourself as chair and Mayor Minions and the two CAOs, Mr. Ply and myself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are there any further comments that I missed? Director Koontz is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't as I've stated before, I don't get remunerated through the regional district any longer. But I see this as, I guess the board could vote on it and have the opportunity for directors who feel as though they should be remunerated, pass the motion and say yes, and then every director has the opportunity to submit an application or to submit for remuneration. Just my comment.
Great. Director Osborn, I think you're next.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that this is a little bit of a messy way of going about making a decision. And when we do this after the fact, it just makes it harder. I do want to point out though that number 3 and 4, the age-friendly meetings and the old growth strategy meeting, there's every opportunity when we make a decision and we're informed about this at previous board meetings with previous staff reports to appoint a person to attend on behalf of the board. And with that comes an expectation to report out to the board anything that needs to be reported. So I'm just so not in favor of asking after the fact about those two things. And I really would encourage the board to stick to the policies that we have in place for expense reimbursement and for the way that board directors are picked and that we discuss as a board and authorize previous to the attendance. I do understand that the EOC updates and the spokesperson work that's being done in the time of COVID is different, and this motion lumps them together, so it is what it is. I still remain of the opinion that the remuneration that we are receiving I feel that board members can put their time as part of their lump sum salary or indemnities that we get, and incorporate that time. There's an ebb and a flow to being an elected official, and there are times when we may go on holiday and miss a few meetings and we don't get our pay deducted for that. And I just think even though COVID is an extraordinary time, the compensation we get overall can account for the ebb and the flow and the little bit of extra work. I appreciate that others may feel differently than me, and if the motion passes, then those of us who don't want to apply or ask for the in reimbursement don't have to. I just don't like that approach. I really feel like if it's approved for the board, then everybody does it. If it's not approved for the board, then nobody does it. But that's me. So thanks for listening.
Okay, any further comments? So I did hear that there is a differentiation between the first and the second and the third and the fourth ostensibly. Would that change anyone's mind in regards to whether or not this is going forward? And for the purposes of what's going on, I don't care. So I'm probably going to not vote. Chair's prerogative. Director Haggard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if you could vote on each one individually instead of as a lump.
Yes.
Would that be more appropriate?
It could be, yes. I mean, it's just more votes, but we might be able to get through this faster if we actually just do the votes rather than the talking. So let's defeat this motion, and then if anybody wants to put anything forward, they can. And then I'll go going once, going twice, sold, and then we'll move on. So let's do that. All those in favor of the motion for all four? Okay. All those opposed? Motion defeated. Okay. All right. Now there's some time for the other ones. Would anyone like to speak before we move on to item E? So there may be a difference for the EOC stuff. The only thing I'm thinking of, and I'm not certain that Director Minions cares, is that she's being the spokesperson for the EOC, and that's ideally supposed to be the job of myself or someone other, but you're not automatically paid through the ACRD. So is that something that's a consideration or not? Going twice. Sold. Okay, we're going on to item E. Oh, somebody's chatting. Sorry. All directors present must vote on all motions. Oh, okay. Sorry, Douglas. I voted no. Okay. All right, that brings us to item E, which was a request for decision regarding the extension of the relaxation of a portion of the ACRD payment processing policy 2012. Oh, that's because the policy is brought in 2012. Thanks, Terry. Please go ahead.
Sure. So at the March 31st meeting, we asked for the ability to have checks over 5,000 approved by email from the directors to eliminate having the face-to-face contact for the signing. The board had asked that we brought back to this meeting some options or some long-term look at this. I've been super busy with the audit and wrapping up the financial statements and getting the financial plan out that I haven't really had a chance to wrap my head around this. I have received some feedback from other regional districts and organizations about what they do that I want to compile for hopefully the beginning board meeting in May, but we've put till the end of May just in case I don't have a chance. So just looking for an extension of that motion that you guys did on March 31st, if possible.
I think end of May is a good idea. Would anyone like to move the motion?
I move the motion. Thank you. Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Do we have a seconder?
Second,
Thank you.
Bob.
Whoa, everyone. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Beckett. Any further comments? I do like the end of the month. I think that's something that we can continue to keep moving on.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. All right, that brings us to item F, which is Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department Asset Management Plan version 1. Ooh, I'm making these. Okay.
So this is the first. This is the first of the fire department asset management plans. Our asset management coordinator Tricia Bryant has worked with Fire Chief Mike Kobus, as well as the Regional Fire Services Manager Charlie Starrett, and the rest of the fire department, as well as our property maintenance person to develop this plan. Yeah, pretty comprehensive. There's a lot of the fire underwriter language in it, and I think it's a good starting point for us moving forward to looking at some more long-term financial planning.
Okay, great. Any further comments? Seeing none, would anyone like to move? Yeah, please go ahead, Director McNabb.
I have a comment with regards to the item on page 105, which is a graph with regards to current replacement cost by percentage. And I kind of don't understand the part of that is the long column that says poor. I don't get what that's actually meaning.
So I don't have the detailed asset listing with me at this time. I would guess there's a number of the trucks that are near the end of their useful life, but that would likely be a good portion of the building.
Okay, so I noticed this in the regional district building one as well, that the building was basically put into this category as having to be replaced. And I mean, I just don't buy that kind of thinking with regards to assets. If you maintain the building, which we have for the fire department, it's been seismically upgraded. It's had quite a bit of money spent inside the building. It's having money spent outside the building. We've done expansion on it. You know, I think the building actually, as a commercial building, is in really quite good shape. And maintained, it should stay that way. So I just don't kind of get the idea on these that down the 5 years down the road, we're going to replace the building. So.
Yeah, we can look into it further. I don't have the details off the top of my head of what all of these are. So we don't need to adopt this today. If we'd like to discuss it further, I can get more information and bring it back to the board. The idea with these first version of the asset management plan is to use the information that we have to kind of develop what those plans are moving forward. So we could use that as part of an improvement plan for future, but I'm not opposed to holding off and bringing that information back to the board if you would like.
Well, I would think that we maybe should do that, because I think it needs to be something we can embrace. You know, one of the comments down here, it was according to the fire chief, the following are credible risks: a major disaster or seismic event causing critical damage to the hall. I mean, and that's what we spent. I can't even remember what it was, $300,000 doing the seismic upgrade to the building. So I think the risk is not particularly major that the building would be damaged, because we did have, you know, credible engineers participate in that project, and I think it mitigated much of our risk with regards to that. And I think when we're doing these things, we need to, you know, to value that that the money that we've spent on upkeep and maintenance and this type of thing, where we've gone out and spent. We did the same thing with the Sprout Lake Fire Departments. That, you know, their buildings were seismically upgraded as well, you know, to the tune of, I think it was almost $1 million for all of the buildings. But so anyhow, I would move that we, you know, kind of table this and have staff have another look at it and make sure that this works for us.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Dr. Roberts? Thank you. Douglas, you had a comment.
Mr. Chair, there's no problem whatsoever with tabling this, and it could come back to perhaps a AV and Bamfield committee or an electoral area directors committee, I suppose. What I was just going to observe is that both the things that Director McNabb concluded on, that is to say that this plan doesn't mandate in any way that the building would be replaced in 5 years, for example, using the regional district's offices as an example. What the plan isn't meant to say that. What it is meant to lay out a bunch of assumptions and provide the data to the board with the assumptions to say that if if the board was to continue delivering services in exactly the same way and with the exact same resources based on these parameters and assumptions, here's the financial ramifications of that, which is in my opinion different than saying we are going to replace a building in 5 years, for example. So it's really just meant to be a tool, and what the board actually decides to do with that information and that tool is really a discussion to be had in the context of longer term financial planning, et cetera. So I wanted to just acknowledge that when we hear the board adopting these plans, we understand that the board's adopting the plan as a set of assumptions with some data, and lining the data and the assumptions up together to provide a financial picture of what it could be. At the same time, we also are not hearing the board saying that they're by that assumption, they're going to conclude that that all of those assets will be replaced in exactly the same way. The point of these are very much to provide information so the board can make whatever decision makes sense given all factors. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any further comments? Okay, seeing none. The motion was moved by Dr. McNabb, seconded by Dr. Roberts to table this until it's been reviewed. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. All right, that brings us to item G, which is the General Government Asset Management Plan version 1. Terry, go ahead.
So the general government plan is mostly the building at 3008 Fifth Avenue, but it also includes a few odd assets that didn't really have a home that we thought we would group into here, including a couple of small street lighting and the welcome sign that is as you come down the hump. This one's also considered for your adoption, but I'm thinking that possibly that same principle that Director McNabb was just speaking about the length of life of the asset might be a similar discussion that you would like staff to look at.
Please go ahead.
John?
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't know if I'm okay. So one thing that kind of jumped out here, other than the building part of it, is the sign coming down the hump. that sign was funded by the Cherry Creek Community Association or the like the improvement district, not by the regional district. So how do we end up owning it?
That sign was actually funded by the director of Cherry Creek at the time that the sign was installed from Cherry Creek funds. It was not through the improvement district.
Ah, okay. So it's Cherry Creek's assets.
It's an asset that I would classify kind of as without a home at this point.
Okay, we're wandering around looking for homeless assets.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of this, the discussion in here with regards to the building and its capability of providing spacing for the future is, really something that has, in my mind, there's a lot more options than just getting rid of the building and building a new building. There's many regional districts and cities have more than one location for their staff to be working out. In fact, our waterworks crews working out of the fire hall in Beaver Creek. So, I think that there's other options versus dumping this building and getting another one. And I don't think in here that I've seen that there's a consideration for, even if we did that 5 years down the road, I mean, we still got an asset, the building itself, that would be a liquid asset to provide funds to, take over a building that was existing or build another building. So I don't think it's a kind of a net loss, which is kind of, to me, what it looks like in here is it just becomes a net loss. So it is a big discussion around that. I think it kind of needs to reflect in here that that's not the only option. I'm done, John.
All right. Thank you. I'm just reading where we're at here. Okay. And are there any further comments? Go ahead, Director Cote.
Thanks. So are we then being asked to refer this back to staff to do similar review as the Beaver Creek Fire Department asset management plan? Would you like a motion to that?
It seems like that's the direction we're heading. Director McNabb, is that your understanding?
Yes, I think that, it's a good report. And I think that it just, Terry and others have been so focused on other issues that maybe we haven't just kind of shown this thing up quite the way it needs to be to have it as a report laying on the table. So yes, I'd like to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
I'll make that second.
I thought she moved it, but okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cote. Now, just to be certain, are we deferring this to come back to the board after the staff look at it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any comments? Dr. Haggard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I read this report, I read it more as really long-term planning, not next year or the year after, but looking at 10 to 20 years down the road. What do we have to do and what do we have to start planning for now at this time? So I think a lot of municipalities and regional districts take a very short-sighted view of what they have to plan for in the future. So I think this is in for a much bigger and longer discussion than what we're maybe ready to do for at this time. So maybe we can put it off and maybe really schedule some time to really dig deep into it. And what do we want to see in the future? And what do we have to start planning for now and preparing for? Nobody likes to raise taxes, and any elected official likes to keep their taxes low, but we really have to start planning for what is a new building going to look like 10, 20 years from now. So I think we really owe it to the next generation to start preparing for that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Haggard. I have Director Cote. Did I miss anyone? Okay, no, please go ahead.
Thank you. Can we refer this to our strategic planning, or would that be a time that would be suitable to be looking at this, not as a solid plan, but that would tie into some of our strategic planning, depending on how far in the future we want to start looking at. I do want to note that our office is very full. Offices are quite small. They've been chopped up and chopped up. I've read that there's a opportunity for possibly another 3 offices. I don't know where they'll put them, but we're tight on space. And I think that sooner than later, we're going to have to start looking at planning for our future for the regional district office space. And as far as the sign goes, I'm not quite sure what, I'd like to know what staff are talking about. They want to replace that. So just that's a question. Thanks.
So I think it's helpful to think of the report as a piece of primary source information for the purposes of strategic planning. So we list out the assets that we have, and then we map out the critical paths to maintaining and ultimately replacing over some amount of decades. So yes, we should have this as something we refer to over a strategic planning process. I see the asset management plan as having 2, maybe 3 components. The first component is what I was talking about, the listing out of what we have, and then the listing out the lifetime and the maintenance and all that, like the actual hard data. And then the second part is what we're going to plan to do with that. So we need that first part to be put down as how it's been done, maybe to be a bit more information on the methodology, just so when people look at it, if they're new coming in, can understand what's being done that way. Although there are documents we could just include with it. And then second is, what are we going to do with this information, and what's the plan over the next 3, 5, 10, 20 years or whatever. And that's the strategic planning component. So I think we should definitely, for sure, keep that involved, keep that incorporated. I think I'm just a bit, I'm wondering, oh, sorry, Douglas, go ahead. You're probably going to answer a question that
The only question I wanted to address, Mr. Chair, is that at the strategic planning exercise, what I would suggest is that the type of question the board wanted to determine is whether or not staff were to go off and create a plan like this, but actually getting into the nuts and bolts of the plan, et cetera, wouldn't be part of the strategic session in staff's view, at least. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the strategic planning process is what we're going to do with the information that we're given, and I think that's pretty straightforward. So with that in mind, let's come back to this board with the expanded conversation about the different options available in regards to what Director McNabb was talking about. And if we could just have some appendix attached to the item on the history of the sign, which is tiny in comparison to every other regional district sign I've seen. I'm just saying, but that being said, we'll get there. Are there any further comments? So seeing none, we do have a motion to defer this, and then staff can come back. Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 8, which is the West Coast multi-use path. So please go ahead, Rob.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
So just by way of reminder, we're pursuing 2 different grant opportunities to help with the cost of this project. The BC Active Transportation Grant, which we submitted our application back in February for. It was missing some details such as engineering and detailed design, as well as confirmation of match funding. We haven't heard back on the status of that one. The other one we're pursuing is the ICE-T grant. We were successful with the first phase, and now we are looking to the second phase, which is due at the end of next month. Again, they want the same detail and possibly a lot more. The guidelines look fairly comprehensive in terms of what they're expecting, and they do predict that it could take 4 months to up to a year to complete all of that. We don't think we're going to or could achieve all of that by the end of May. And so are requesting to the board to defer to next year to complete the phase 2 of the ICE-T grant. And that's the recommendation.
Okay. Director Osborn.
I will move then that the board of directors direct staff to defer completion of phase 2 of the ICE-T Economic Infrastructure and Innovation Grant application for the West Coast MUC till 2021.
Do we have a seconder?
Seconded, Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Fast on the draw. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the Burning Regulation Public Engagement Plan, item 8I, the last one in item 8. Okay, burning regulation. Oh, yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Erg.
Yeah, so at the last board meeting, the board considered the 2 burning bylaws that we had and asked that staff put together a plan to do public engagement, based on the COVID crisis, how we would approach that. So Mr. Dyer's put together some recommendations for the board and the plan, and staff recommends that the board endorse the public engagement strategy.
Any comments? Dr. McNabb, please go ahead. And then Director Shannon.
So I would move that we concur with the staff's plan to move forward with public engagement on this.
Great. Do we have a second? Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Bodner. Okay, we now have a motion. Did you have a follow-up, Director McNabb?
No, I just kind of like what we had at last meeting. I mean, we've been working on this whole project for many, many years, and it is something that's highly critical in the Alberni Valley because of the nature of the water or the airshed that we have. It's a very unique airshed, and we need to have as much control on open burning as possible. Right at the moment, we're at the whim of Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resources to maintain the quality of air in our airshed. So I think that we need to get the ball rolling and get this done and get on with life.
Great. Thank you. Next up, I have Director Shannon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy to see that Mr. Dyer has put quite the comprehensive plan together, especially seeing that he's recommending it go to the Agriculture Development Committee as well as the APCs for the electoral areas. While I really appreciate that this has been going on for a long time, I don't think that the public is necessarily aware of that, and that's why this is so important. Thank you.
Great. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to planning matters. 9.1, this is for electoral areas only. Item 9.1A is the development application process during COVID-19 provincial state of emergency, a request for a decision. So Mr. Erg, if you take us through the 3-part motion. And
sure. So staff have 2 recommendations for the for procedural changes. The first one would be to not refer development applications to ABC meetings. And the second would be to waive public hearings where there's opportunities in the Local Government Act to not hold a public hearing. So, and the reason for these is that the ministerial order that allowed board meetings, standing committee, and select committee meetings to be held without the public present, didn't encompass advisory planning commissions or public hearings. Now we cannot hold public hearings, and the ministry is working on what options are available for that. And the advisory planning commissions, there's an option for the board to to not have an advisory planning commission meeting with applications. And then the third component is, if the board supports that 1 and 2, is that once the board considers an application, staff will refer that application to the individual members of the advisory planning commission, and also we would notify the APC of the current situation, and if the board accepts these recommendations or moves ahead with them, we'll let the APC sort of know what's happening there as well. And I would also note that individual staff reports will include the specific recommendations to, if required, waive a public hearing, and to not refer to an APC. And we do have a number of development applications as well as some inquiries that this would need to be in place to address. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have Director Cote, and I think just that so far. Go ahead, please. And Director McNabb.
Thank you. So through our chair to staff, because we have the Zoom meeting in place, and with live streaming, would it be a big problem to have the APC meetings continue on that platform?
So if I may, Mr. Chair, we considered that. So it's not that we couldn't have electronic meetings. We have to have meetings open to the public. So that would be the concern. So we would have to have a place that the public could come and attend. And I guess the other thing I would point out that if we do hold an APC meeting, it has to be open to the public, and that's a statutory requirement. Whereas if the board passes a resolution not to refer to the APC meeting, that is not a statutory it's not a statutory requirement to hold the APC meeting. Mm-hmm. So we've created it's a bit of a conundrum we have to deal with. So
sorry, I just don't understand the difference between this board meeting, which is live streaming, and people can send emails for comments, for questions, or and the difference between that and an APC meeting. So
if I may, so the ministerial order that came out in March 26th addressed board meetings as well as select and standing committee meetings. So the rules or legislation that applies to requiring an APC meeting to be held, be open to the public, doesn't apply to our committees, including our agricultural committees and this board meeting. So, we've set up a process to involve the public, but we don't have to physically let the public, members of the public, attend the meeting. And we don't have that option with an APC. We have had legal advice on this about the best process, best way to proceed, and it is also the advice of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs.
Can I keep going?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So I had a question around previously around, do we have many applications coming forward that need to go or should be going to the APC, or require a public hearing? And staff, Mr. Erg, has said that there's not a lot really coming forward at this time. Is this still true? And it feels very awkward moving forward without having public consultation with public matters such as this. Thanks.
So if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So the public consultation still happens. So with with respect to a public hearing, the process, if the board waives a public hearing, they can only do it in circumstances where there is an official community plan in place and a proposed zoning bylaw complies with that community plan. So, for example, if somebody was rezoning a property to a residential to allow a subdivision, and the community plan was already included that residential designation, there's an option to waive the holding of the public hearing. But there's still a requirement for public input. Now, public input happens similar to how we deal with temporary use permits and variance applications. So the board and staff would be required to still notify all neighboring property owners and residents within 100 meters and provide for written comments that the board could receive. And then with respect to the advisory planning commissions, the process that we're recommending and envisioning is that the application would come to the board, and the board would pass a resolution to either proceed to the next step or first reading of a bylaw. Staff would then notify the individual APC members. If it's in Sprout Lake, the Sprout Lake APC members would be notified of what's going on, just so that they're still in the loop. And there's nothing that prevents APC members from participating as individual residents. So there's still an opportunity for the individual APC members to provide their comments through the public process. And with respect to applications, I don't have the exact numbers, but I'm aware off the top of my head there was 2 public hearings that are on hold because we can't have them right now that could be dealt with under this process, as well as 2 or 3 other development applications. So there is, and we've also had some inquiries. So there is a number of applications, both that in the normal process would go to ABCs and public hearings. And I do, my recommendation is that we move ahead with this, because I think it's important, in the current situation we're in, to keep development applications moving along wherever possible. And how we would proceed with this if the board endorses these recommendations is each individual application would be still come to the board, and a decision would have to be made on to not refer it to the APC. Would be one of the recommendations that staff bring forward. So the board considers that, and then the board has to consider in each instance whether to waive the public hearing or not.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erg. I think next up I have Director McNabb.
So my comment with regards to this can we actually select which of these applications we want to defer to a time that we can have a public hearing? For instance, if somebody wanted to build a marijuana production plant in somewheres where it had to be zoned properly, which it would have to be now, because they're all up for reconsideration by the board. Is that something that we could defer to a time down the road where we can actually have a public hearing?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. So each one would be looked at, on its own merits by the board. So if there was something that the board felt was contentious and required a public hearing, that is always the option to defer that until that can happen. And each one can be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think what I'm going to do is, I think it's going to be an issue for some folks just in the general public that public hearings are not necessarily on the table automatically. At least that's the sense that they will get. And I get the sense that we should be able to use technology to create some sort of public engagement. If it doesn't, the problem is that it might not meet exactly the standards written out in law. That being said, I do know that I think Tofino does a few innovative things with how they engage with public on district meetings and potentially other things as well. But I just would ask maybe Director Osborn to clarify.
Sure, thanks. Well, we haven't figured it out yet either. I think we're in the same position as the regional district with respect to trying to figure out how to use Zoom to permit public questions and using a waiting room and a gallery and all of that. I don't know if staff has any ideas or hints from the province as to when they might be coming out with some decisions or guidance on public hearings. So, but I will say for the record, because I also get to vote on this particular item as well, that I actually support what staff has written, but I recognize that the area directors are the ones, you know, your constituents best, obviously, and this is the place where most of the public hearings would fall. I think that we are very much accustomed to the way things have been done for a very long time, and that people feel the expectation that they can come physically and stand before the directors and have the regional district and have their views heard. Personally, this is an opportunity to make some shifts, and I actually hope that the province looks at it, because there's many things about the way public hearings are advertised and conducted that I think are not as modern as they could be. Printing in the newspaper is kind of it's like a really old-fashioned way of providing notices now, and there are new and better ways to do things. So I'm okay with staff's recommendation, and I think there's ways to get around it and provide other alternatives for public view that the directors take just as seriously as they do when somebody comes in physically to a room and stands before us. And if anything, it actually could prevent, new ways of doing this could prevent some of the, frankly, poor behaviors we have seen at public hearings and provide for a more balanced and fair process for everybody. But yeah, that's where I stand. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, I see your video's on, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just further to Director Osborn's question about contact with the province. I did reach out last Thursday afternoon to one of the assistant deputy ministers who's in charge of this file, and she got back to me to say they're still working on it. They're using the ministry lawyers to try to figure out ways to modify the legislation, at least on an interim basis, if not, as Director Osborn says, maybe more permanently. So that we can proceed. In the meantime, the intentions of these recommendations are trying to get as much normalcy and trying to keep as much activity going as possible, as normal as we can be, where these processes have to, while these processes have to be modified so that people's lives in this world of pandemic can continue on to some degree when we do get applications. If we do hear something new from the ministry in the coming weeks, then we would of course be back in front of the board to try to have hopefully a more inclusive process, one like again that was just described a moment ago.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that answers a question I was going to ask in regards to if there are any things that come up that changes our approach, we'll be able to come back and make a decision that fits with that. So there are the techno geek parts of me are kind of going, there are things we can do online, and it would be better than a public hearing in a physical place, like fully. So there are things we can do that will make the process better and involve the public in meaningful ways. I see this as a stopgap until the province has come in anyway. So I think there isn't necessarily harm given the questions and answers that have happened already. That being said, we do have a set of one motion with 3 parts in front of us. So I'll ask the board's wishes at this point. So this is something that the electoral area directors and Tofino can vote on. Director Shannon.
Thank you. Just to put my comments in on this, while I appreciate what the intent is here, it does make me uncomfortable because this is where our constituents can have their input. So, and on number 3 of this motion, I'm just looking for some clarification. Do we have the opportunity, if we have the APC, like if we do public notices that some things are coming down, even though the meetings can't be open to the public, where if we're looking for input, we can send those advertisements specifically to our APCs, or is that not work?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we can note, and our intention is to notify the individual APC members. We can't hold an APC meeting without having the meeting open to the public. So we can't do an APC meeting by email or an APC meeting by Zoom in a way that would exclude public participation. So the intent of 3 is to just update the Advisory Planning Commission that this application is proceeding. Most of the development applications that the board will consider have a public input process. So this because we're not holding a public hearing or not holding the APC meeting doesn't mean that there isn't a public input process. So that would still be followed, and still there'd still be the opportunity for any resident to provide their comment through the public input process. And I would just also note, and just to reiterate that each application is gonna, so what we're looking for now is that the board sort of supports this in principle. Each individual development application will still have a specific motion to not refer to the APC for the board to consider. And if it's a rezoning application, to waive notice of public hearing, as per the section of the act, and we'll outline in the report what the public input process is. So just, if the board endorses or supports this recommendation, you're still going to have the ability to look at each individual application and make a decision on whether to proceed and how to proceed.
Thank you. A quick follow-up, Director Shannon, before we go to Director Cote. I see.
Yes, thank you. So I guess just for clarification, so there will be some sort of public input for each one with this. And then I guess my only comment would be then I would like to see, and I think we've obviously touched on this already, like Chair Jack has mentioned, that we utilize all avenues possible that we can for this. I know it's tricky, it's all unprecedented, but I really think that public involvement is really important.
Okay. Director Cote and then Director Bodner.
Thank you. The report also talks about public hearing and posting a sign. That's normal procedure when a notice is posted on subject property for what?
Yes.
Okay, so that'll come forward. I don't think that there is newspapers that are even being delivered anymore. I'm not quite sure about that. Haven't been out of the house enough. Just concerned that people won't be made aware. And also I'd really like to know what kind of notification is going to be given to our APC members regarding this new procedure. Thanks.
So if I can, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so depending on the board's decision, we're going to inform all of the APC members of what the board's decision is today, and include a copy of this report. The newspaper is being delivered, and that opportunity is there. And so if it is a rezoning application, for example, the public notification will still happen. We will still deliver notices to all property owners and residents within 100 meters. So it's the same notification process that would follow if there was a public hearing. The difference would be that the opportunity will be to write into the board prior to the board voting in our process on second reading of a rezoning application or second reading of a zoning bylaw. So the board will receive the written input prior to making a decision, and I just want to note again that this option to waive notice of public hearing can only happen if the rezoning the proposed rezoning were to comply with the unofficial community plan, which has already been reviewed and the public has had input into it.
Yeah.
So, Director McNabb's question about a cannabis facility, I think the way we've drafted our bylaws, that would require, in most cases, a public hearing anyhow, and it is always the board's choice if they felt it was a contentious issue to, postpone considering second and third reading until such time as we're able to hold a public hearing again.
Thank you. Next up, I have Director Bodner, and if there's anyone else, seeing none, go ahead, Director Bodner.
Yes, I just want to reiterate what Director Shannon has saying, how important it is that we do really try to find ways for public input process during this time. And it might even be, like you said, step back and may have to do look at the postal system for now. But I think we really need to stay on top of this. We don't know how long this virus is going to be lasting. So, and the different areas that come up that may need public input, perhaps it can be looked at as a triage situation. What's the most important that needs to be done? So, but I think it's really, and how long is the province going to take before it comes up with some ideas? It's not like they're just sitting around either. So I think it's important for us to be able to find, perhaps even look at what other areas they're doing that they're finding that's working for them. That's it.
Thank you, Director Bodner. Okay, so with that in mind, there is a three-part motion in front of us. I would suggest that that you do accept it, because then we can take steps to do as much as we can, even knowing that using Zoom or some sort of electronic capacity does not meet the standards in the law. Because of the COVID situation, we wouldn't be able to meet the standards anyway without taking some high risks. I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I can already think of using the web seminar function on Zoom would allow for public participation to be actually pretty good. The only thing I don't know is whether or not you can make somebody in the gallery a part of the panel to speak and then kick them out to be back in the gallery. That would be the only thing for me, but that still doesn't meet the standards. So it's important to be able to waive all of this and still do that. It doesn't qualify as a public meeting, but it's still public engagement. And I think that's the compromise until the province weighs in. So with that in mind, it's one motion. Is that correct, Wendy? It's not three? Yeah, it's one motion. Director McNabb, please go ahead.
Okay. So I would move that we direct staff to present staff reports and recommendations for proceedings with development applications without referring the application to the Advisory Planning APC Commission while the ministerial order M083 is in effect. And it's one motion, sorry.
Yeah.
And that we direct staff to prepare reports and provide recommendations for rezoning applications, which include the recommendations to waive holding a public hearing where section 464.2 of the Local Government Act applies for the duration of the ministerial order M083, and direct staff to notify all ACRD ABCs of this procedural change and provide updates to the application for the electoral area APCs after the board has reviewed the development applications. So can we add or clarify that by after the board has given first reading?
Good question.
That's a question more of staff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I can answer. So we left it the way it is because some of the applications that the APC reviews isn't a rezoning application. So it might be the first step in a variance process, or it may be a form and character development permit. I'm just thinking a couple of applications that will be coming forward. So it's not just rezonings. But the intent is the board, after the board's considered it the first time, we will notify the Advisory Planning Commission.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Osborn. Any further comments? I think we've exhausted comments. Okay, remember, this is for EA directors and Tofino. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. All right, thank you. That brings us to item 9.2, meat slaughter licensing in the ACRD. Oh, okay.
So it's me again.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I just staff's recommending that the board write another letter to the Ministry of Agriculture asking that for a Class D and E slaughter license for the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, and I just we've been doing working on this project and through the Ag Development Committee for quite some time. I think given the COVID crisis that we're in and some of the issues we're seeing in the news about large slaughter facilities, this is becoming even more important. So I just, staff recommends that the board endorse this and write the letter to the minister.
Thank you. I had a question in regards to an emailed letter from, I can't remember what they're called now, in response to this. Is this something that we should CC them on as well, just so that they see it? I guess that's easy enough to do. Yeah.
We certainly could copy the Agriculture Development Committee as well as the Farmers Institute.
Yeah, that's the one, the Alberni Valley Farmers Institute. Director Shannon, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, I think we all received it, that the Alberni Farmers Institute did receive a response from the province within the last week or so. And essentially the answer was a non-answer from the way I read it. They didn't really say yes, they didn't say no, and they just sent a bunch of fluff, which doesn't help anybody. And I know, being a member of the Alberni Farmers Institute, there's getting to be some extreme frustrations with this process with the province. So hope maybe in our letter that we write to the province, like I know we're going for this other one again, because the province mentioned that all food chain supplies seem to be going fine right now. That was in the response to the Farmers Institute, that we just maybe include that we have been in contact with them and that we know they got a response, but I think that I feel like we should side with the Farmers Institute that it's not helpful. We expect more.
I saw Director Cote.
Thanks. I kind of brought this up before our last board meeting, but I hadn't talked to the Farmers Institute or the Ag Development Committee. But I really want to push this. I think that the province has got the wrong information that was sent to the Ag Development in the last letter, or the Farmers Institute. They're saying that the abattoir in Nanaimo was open, and I believe it's closed. So that lessens our opportunities to have working farms that can actually have meat slaughtered and provided for, the 100-mile diet. There's been problems in the past with the sending product out of town, and when it comes back, it's not theirs, or there's a problem, or there's stress on the animals sending them so far away. I talked with people from Powell River, and they were on a pilot project for getting a D or E licensing in that area. They're a lot closer, but they have a ferry to take to an abattoir. But regardless, right now we're all facing a real crisis with the COVID. There's been emails that I've been receiving regarding factory closures because of people in these slaughterhouses actually contracting the COVID-19, and so they've closed down those facilities. This might result in a slowdown of product coming to us. So right now is the time where the province needs to support us and allow this to happen, even if it's just for the short time. It needs to happen. It really needs to happen for the long time. But so I'd like to move this recommendation at this time, unless anybody has more.
You can move it, and I'll write down Director Shannon is seconding.
Okay, so I'll move. You want me to read it or just?
Yeah, please, if you would.
Okay, I move that the Board of Directors write a letter to the Ministry of Agriculture to reiterate the ACRD's request to be included as a designated region for Class D and E slaughter licensing under the meat inspection regulation, noting increased urgency during the COVID pandemic.
And seconded by Director Shannon. That's okay. Alrighty. Are there any further comments? Director Haggard and then Director Beckett, maybe, and Director Roberts. Dr. Haggard, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that I've really learned during this COVID-19 pandemic is that we have to be way more self-sufficient, and we can't rely on other communities or go in imports or exports. We have to be more self-sufficient as a region, as a community. That's why everybody's quickly trying to plant gardens or putting vegetables in pots on their patios. We don't know when those food supply chains might be broken. So we really have to really push this very hard, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Director Beckett. Did you want to say anything? I know that you're unmuted. No? Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. And Director Roberts?
Yes, thank you. I concur with all of the comments, particularly from Director Shannon and also from Director Cote. With the closure of the Cargill plant in Alberta, which is just one, and the poultry processing facility in Vancouver, which is another, the US is shutting down all kinds of their processing plants as well. And it behooves us to push again. And I think this letter is really, really appropriate to reinforce it, because I would suspect that that the provincial government is going to have to retract some of their comments with regards to this, or non-comments with regards to the meat slaughter licensing in the regional district. And thank you for the support, and I appreciate the work that the staff has done on this as well. Thank you.
Great. Any further comments? Dr. Shannon?
Thank you. Just a question is, what are our options beyond sending a letter if we're feeling more action is needed? If we have any.
A UBCM resolution.
I'll work on it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I just thank you, everybody. I know there's a lot of frustrations because it's actually been taking years to try and get this done by local agriculture producers. And it's becoming a real problem, especially as we mentioned with the closure of Plecas and Nanaimo. And yeah, just really need to get it done. And note too that the Farmers Institute, everybody's working on this. They're all volunteers, and they've been putting a ton of time into research into things on top of like what we've been doing with ag support programs. But it's stressful, and it's been a ton of work, and I think that needs to be acknowledged too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Are there any further comments? I saw Mike and Douglas jump on and then jump off. So if you don't jump on again, it's okay. Okay. All right. All those in favor?
All right.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. That brings us to reports. First up is 10.1, which is just staff report meeting schedule. Any comments on the meeting schedule? If not, we can just move to accept.
Move to receive the report to Director Koontz.
Thank you, Director Koontz. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, 10.2, no committee reports. 10.3, member reports. 10.3A, 911 Corporation, Director McNabb.
Okay, I've got a couple of things on that. double check. Yes. So just with regards to the amount of calls that North Island 911 is getting over the month of March, the calls for fire calls were down 12.9%, and the first responder calls were down 3.3%. The one thing that was up was calls through the fire response 911 about outdoor burning with regards to the provincial notification. And so it's people not understanding who is supposed to be actually responding to the complaints with regards to open burning. And it was of interest that we had a situation on the weekend here, and the resident phoned under my instructions to the RAP line, and there was nobody responded. She phoned again, and about an hour or so later actually got to talk to somebody and was informed that there was only one conservation officer in the Alberni Valley actually responding to those sort of things. And if there was an animal complaint, they were prioritizing that and not responding to the open burning issues. So I think the message from that is the provincial government actually needs to step up the funding for this activity during the COVID issue, because they're the ones that can actually find these people for burning. It's not that people don't know they're not supposed to be burning, it's that they don't care and they think they can get away with it because of the level of response that's there. So the second thing that I have with regards to North Island 119, you probably remember that we talked about during the budget about the next generation 911 and where it's going to be sort of all media 911. So the federal government has put off the deadlines for all of that process for a year, and sometimes in some cases a year and a half. So this is kind of important because we did budget in North Island 911 to have a segment of this completed within schedule, and we put that into our taxation and actually intend to carry that out and have that in place so that we're actually ahead of the project instead of behind. The timelines that were originally given were really compressed, and this will actually give us a much better opportunity to comply fully by the end of the day. So that's it for North Island 911. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McNabb. That brings us to Vancouver Island Regional Library, Director Cote.
Thanks. We had a meeting, executive meeting recently to discuss the closure of Vancouver Island Regional Library's temporary closure. So there's a lot of programming that's in place. If you stand outside of a library, you can get free internet. They've increased the amount of ebooks and all of their programming. So our members have increased, I think, 30%, something like that. It's a big jump. We're looking at working with the school districts on helping to provide resources for students. So they're really stepping up, working with the province also, saying, use us, we're a resource. So we'll keep you in touch with what's happening with Bureau. I think that there's been a mail out too, email out with information. We have a full board meeting on this Saturday, which should be interesting. Very big Zoom meeting. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I'm one of those 30%. Okay, that brings us to the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, Director Minions.
Thank you. There's a meeting coming up, but just kind of reporting on activities and what the Chamber's focus has been, they've been very much looking to act as a conduit to information for businesses. So with all of the changing regulations and changing programs out there, they are putting their newsletter out, it seems like about 3 or 4 times a week right now. For anyone subscribed, you're getting constant Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce emails, but it's been very helpful. And I've heard that feedback from a lot of our local businesses that that's where they're going for their information now. So it's nice that they're providing that service. They've also been working in partnership with our Economic Development Office and Community Futures to do business surveys. And I think they've surveyed just about every small business in town and are moving on to large businesses as well, just to understand the impacts of COVID-19 on their businesses and try to understand, you know, if the questions asked are things like, if COVID-19 persists, what will, you know, can your business adapt, or will you have to close permanently? And the results that we've been getting are really encouraging. So I think the newspaper that goes out today has a more information on those survey results. So it's been very positive so far, and we've seen a lot of businesses, or the chamber has seen a lot of businesses adapting and really seeming positive about the current outlook. So good news so far, and a lot of work being done by the chamber.
There we go. Thank you very much. That brings us to the Air Quality Council, Port Alberni. Director Bodner, any highlights?
Yes, there was some concern about the chipping process and why the diameter of the branches were going down. It all had to do with cost at the landfill, that it costs a lot more. And right now the landfill isn't set up to be able to chip anything more than the 1-inch diameter. So Jenny spoke to us and said that the ACRD received a Fire Smart grant for 2020, and it was the grant which was specified $20,000 for chipping. So there was different ideas that they suggested, like having bins one weekend in the fall and in the spring to waive tipping fees, and that individuals that wouldn't be able to get rid of their waste, that perhaps someone could come and pick it up. So we're still looking at those things and reviewing that. Also, that wood waste could be reduced to $55 a ton. Measuring the methane gas at the landfill and the Shishart Reserve. The ACRD is in partnership with the VIU to measure methane and the PM 2.5 and other gas levels. Currently, the levels are low. And this was a report from March the 5th. I forgot to say that. The air quality in Port Alberni for the Earl has suggested, was stating that the day of the week is important, and the weekends and the spring burning seem to be very significant for sources of the PM 2.5, and that it was important for the ACRD continue to investigate open burning bylaws to complement the city bylaws. The wood stove exchange, there was lots of advertising done, and Tracy hasn't received any calls regarding any exchange or any interest, and there's been 0 exchanges. There was 3 or 4 people that did go from Port Alberni to the BC Lung Association conference, and their focus was on air quality research and knowledge and transition strategy. Lucas, I invited Lucas from the fire chief for Cherry Creek to come and to explore potential opportunities and collaborations regarding the burning. He suggested that there be less regulations outdoor burning and more education to promote proper burning using videos and via social medias. And he also stated the importance of using the wrap line. Mike Owens also stated that that the city is overhauling their bylaws and examining which bylaws work and don't work. He gave some suggestions on how wood stove monitoring how old the wood stove is and gave some recommendations. So, and see whether it's really enforceable or not. So those are the highlights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Bodner. That brings us to the West Coast Aquatic Board. Director Osborn, anything to report?
I think Director Cote had a question for Director Bodner.
Oh, sorry, Director Cote.
Thank you. I do. It's actually comments that I'm receiving from the community regarding and air quality. So I've had someone that said that they took their debris, their branches back home to burn, because anything over an inch in diameter is not, you have to pay for it now at the landfill. So,
yes.
So that is particularly hitting the community. It was a young family, one of the comments that brought it back. So nobody's working with the hardships that people are having right now. Not accepting materials seems to be kind of the wrong time right now. I'd say that all of that debris is going to end up in the bush or being burnt. So it's going to actually work against us somewhat. Thanks.
Thanks. I have Dr. McNabb next.
Hi, just to say with regards to that last comment with the charge on wood products at the landfill, I just removed 9 large laurel trees at our property, and I took all of it to the landfill. I paid a total of $10 for the stuff that was over 1 inch, and that was about 200 pounds worth of product. The stuff that's under 1 inch is absolutely free, and it's easy to unload. It's not a problem. And I would remind people that the loads have to be covered when you take them to the landfill, so that we're not dropping junk all over the roadway going up by the Tishat. So, but I think for what I did and the volume that I actually had, once I broke it down and got down to 1 inch, I mean, and it was so cheap. It like, I don't know why somebody wouldn't do it. I mean, if you're logging, it's a different story. If the things are, they don't charge any more for something that's a foot around than they do for something that's 3 inches. It's the total weight of the load, and it's really surprisingly inexpensive. So I don't understand why anybody wouldn't actually do it. I saw somebody actually heading out the highway with a load of branches on Wednesday last week, and I'm thinking to myself, like, where are you going and why are you doing that? Because they could have turned the other way, went to the landfill, and what he had on the truck, he could have easily unloaded for nothing, free.
I think that warrants a communication at that point. I think that's an important thing to state. So thank you for that, Dr. McNabb. I'm wondering if I missed anyone though. Is there any other comments on this? Okay, seeing none. Now we'll go to West Coast Aquatic.
Yeah, nothing to report. Thank you.
Oh, nice and easy. Okay, Director Cote, back to you for the AVICC.
So AVICC, we just had a meeting this morning. The executive talked about the cancellation of the convention this past weekend. There was a virtual cocktail party. There was about 20 to 25 people. It was interesting conversations. Went over quite well. I participated. And I know that Director Osborn was there also. So moving forward now, we're looking at possibly having our AVICC AGM at the UBCM AGM, if it goes. But my assumption is that it won't be happening the way that we expect it to be happening. So AVICC is contemplating that we may have to do our own AGM. We're in our bylaws, our policies, we are mandated to have an AGM annually. So how we are going to achieve that is sort of up in the air at this point. We are contemplating what to do for next year. We have some ideas for the convention. We'd like to continue it to be just put off till next year what we were planning for this year. All of the plans are made, so it makes perfectly good sense to do that. We have to contact those communities that we have lined up. There's also the issues around our resolutions that came forward at AVICC. Unless they were area specific to that, UBCM would kick them back to us. We've passed them all on to UBCM for them to make comments. So we'll see what happens with that. So just to say that our resolutions that did go forward aren't dead in the water. There is also a few other issues that we're looking at. The Vancouver Island Transportation Master Plan that was requested by at previous UBCM, so that we make a committee up that's being looked at for the future. It's not being disregarded. It's just that right now with COVID-19, we have a lot of issues that are standing in our way to move on with business. Also, there's a letter to us requesting us to support the letter from Al Sebring from Municipality of North Cowichan with concerns about ferry traffic to Vancouver Island. We at AVICC, the executive recognizes that not every member of AVICC signed that. So we're writing a letter saying that we identify that some of our members have concerns about ferry traffic, especially coming up to the May long weekend. Increased traffic, and our concerns are very vital. A lot of communities have big concerns. I know Sprout Lake is quite populated, so we're saying that we understand that, and understanding also that it's the province and the health officer that make recommendations to BC Ferries in regard to controlling the traffic that's coming our way. And that's my report.
Thank you, Director Cote. Next up, we have Director McNabb with the Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee and the West Island Woodlands Advisory Group right after. So just please continue on.
So the Beaver Creek Advisory, we haven't had a meeting, but our new project for the new water lines will be starting shortly, creating some activity. And just like to report that the Beaver Creek water system is operating as normal, as opposed to some things in the world. It actually is functioning well, and complaints that we've any breakages or anything else will be responded to as normal. So we're reporting our glass half full. And Westland Island Advisory, there hasn't been a meeting.
Thank you. Are there any other reports? Okay, seeing none. Could we get a motion to accept the reports, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Director
McNabb,
and seconded by Director Beckett. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to unfinished business, of which there is none. Item 12, late business. No late business.
So could I just speak for 2 seconds here? Have we got a hospital meeting after this?
No, it's next month.
No?
Yeah, that's the next meeting. We had a hospital district
Oh, good.
last time.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
good, because I had something on that and I didn't want to miss out having it. Sorry.
Oh no, that'll be the next meeting. Okay, question period. Dave, are you still around? Do you have anything to ask? I think he's gone. Yeah, he's gone. I guess Wendy, is there anything on responses?
Yes, thank you. So nothing was received from the public. No questions, no input on the meeting today.
All right, I'm gonna check the YouTube comments right away. All right, there are no YouTube comments. There were a few minutes ahead though, so I think that's the problem. Okay. All right, that brings us to the in-camera agenda. Do we have a motion to go in camera, please?
So moved.